So where should you get started managing your personal finances? That's what we're talking about today in this session. So let's get moving forward. Hi everyone, welcome to The Plan Ranger, where our goal is to provide you with informed insights and a reasonable approach to managing your personal finances. Now, when people get started managing their personal financial situation, one of the first questions that comes to mind is, where do I start? Do I start with budgeting? Do I start with my debts? Do I start with my investments? Do I make a vision board? Whatever. There's so many different areas that you could start from that it's almost impossible to know exactly, but in the financial planning world, we have a kind of an order of operations that we usually suggest. But before we get to that, one of the things that you should be aware of is the idea that, you need to have a destination in mind. When we refer to this thing behind me, the trailhead, your goals are your destinations, your places that you're trying to get to. And you need to have goals in mind. You have to have some idea, or at least it's beneficial to have some idea of where you want to go. Where are you trying to get your finances to take you? Now, not in every scenario, you can't always put your finger on it and say, I want exactly this and I want it exactly at this time and so on and so forth. But even a general idea of what direction you want to head can be helpful as far as making some of the decisions regarding the topics we're going to touch on here in just a second. So one of the things you might want to do is just sit down and kind of draw out a list of goals if you don't have one already. Even if they're not exact, if you don't really feel your heart's in it completely, just to try and have an idea of where do you want all this to take you? What are your priorities? So that's your goals. The other thing that's important to consider, when you're getting started, and this will be something that we'll touch on in probably a different video here, is a sense of purpose. Why? Probably one of the hardest questions you can get into, and certainly one of those ones that I can't answer for you, or nobody else can answer for you. You just have to answer it yourself. And also, I also want to be cautious here because this starts to wade into the waters of the guru business, and I am ardently not that, and just am wildly not a fan of that stuff. So you have to kind of figure out how to live your life. But having a sense of why, having that sense of purpose is helpful, and I think in most cases vital when it comes to at least being happy with your finances. Not so much planning it, but at least being happy with your finances, your life, your situation regarding your money. So if you can answer those things, it's helpful. As you set out to start planning your financial future, you need to understand that there are different areas of personal finance. And when you talk about getting started managing your finances or getting into personal finance, what we're really talking about is making more effective financial decisions. And the best way to do that is to take into account the 5 factors of personal finance. Those factors being cash flow, assets and liabilities, risk management, tax planning, and estate planning. Now, none of these areas are really that glamorous aside from maybe cash flow and assets and liabilities. Risk management, tax planning, and estate planning are not very glamorous at all, but they're extremely important. And whether you know it or not, they're going to play a part in every decision you make, pretty much. In fact, all 5 of these areas are somehow affected by every financial decision you make. So you need to understand at least what they are, be familiar with them. So your cash flow is pretty straightforward. That's going to be budgeting. That's going to be your income and your expenditures. What comes in and what goes out. Now there's a lot more to that, and the types of income you can have and the types of debts. And then you've got taxes in the mix there too. Is the income passive? Is it active? So on and so forth. But cash flow is really that blood flow there. What's coming in, what's going out. So that would be thing number 1. Thing number 2 is assets and liabilities. And this is probably the area that most people spend most of their time on because it includes things like, investments, savings, emergency funds, your debts like, your mortgage, car payment, credit cards, student loans. These are the massive areas of things of finance, deals with accumulation. So a lot of people tend to probably spend most of their time on assets and liabilities. The next area would be risk management. So when I say risk management, that sounds fancy, but it's really just insurance. The thing is, a lot like budgeting is just a part of cash flow. Insurance is just a part of risk management. So there's risks that are involved with your investments. There are risks involved with everyday life. Some of those risks you can transfer to a company, to an insurance company, by virtue of using an insurance contract, some of those risks you have to basically take on yourself and self-insure or just absorb those risks. But you need to at least be aware of what they are. And that's kind of the realm of risk management, is you choosing which risks you want to take, which risks you don't, and how much how much you want to transfer to somebody else, like an insurance company, and how much you want to keep on your side of the ledger, and what the pricing for all that will be. We've got tax strategies, which for most people, tax strategies is one of those things where once upon a time, it probably used to have a more profound impact than it does now for your everyday walkabout person. Especially with the changes that occurred, recently, where now the standard deduction is $24,000 for married filing and jointly, $12,000 single. So nowadays, when it comes to your tax strategies, what that's really going to come down to more than anything else is choosing what types of accounts you use to save and invest your money. There are different tax advantages to, benefits and pitfalls to using different types of accounts. And really tax planning kind of comes down to that. Finally, you've got estate planning. Estate planning is how you, plan to transfer assets, things, and debts for that matter, things you've accumulated in your time on this earth to somebody else or something else. And so your estate planning comes into play there too, as far as, hey, do you have a 401k? If you do, you have a beneficiary attached to that, whether it's your estate or whether you've named somebody in particular. Estate planning goes beyond that as well into some end of life planning issues, but for the most part, just for now, think about how you want to transfer assets and debts, how you want those things to go to people you care about or things you care about as efficiently as possible, right? So we have these 5 areas: cash flow, assets, liabilities, risk management, tax planning, and estate planning. As you start making decisions, first and foremost, just be aware that these things exist. That's step number 1. Be aware that there are these 5 areas that you should probably be at least taking into account. Step 2 would be take a deep breath. There's really no rush with any of this stuff. And, it can sometimes planning your finances can feel like there's this train moving off to the side of you and you need to try and jump on it as fast as possible. And sometimes you got to get a running start. You got to take some time, learn about this stuff, and get your bearings and kind of gauge the speed of everything before you try and make that leap onto that train. But, don't be afraid to take a beat, learn a little bit, inform yourself a little bit, and then start making some more lasting decisions as far as your money goes. Once you've done that, once you've kind of said, okay, I can take a beat, then one of the next steps you could actually take that a lot of people overlook would be to take a financial inventory. And that financial inventory should look at things like, what are your assets? Just make a list of them. Write down everything you have financially. Even if it's things like, tangible things like I've got a lot of electronics, I've got jewelry, I've got, these, Hummel statues that you inherited from grandma, 20 years ago. Whatever your assets are, just make a list of them. Now do the same thing with your debts. Take a look at kind of everything you have financially. Start there, because that financial inventory is it is your starting place. That's where you're at right now. That's what you have to work with, and what you have to deal with. So you've got these 2 things here to kind of hit your starting point. After you've done that, then the next step would basically be to look at your income and your expenditures and make sure that you're not spending more than you're making. That's probably where all of personal finance hinges. I'm not a big believer in basic rules or one size fits all or anything like that. But if there was one rule, then it would probably be don't spend more than you make. In fairness, I'm a big fan of nuance. So there are times where you can do it and get away with it for a little bit, but those are really narrow circumstances and you have to be extremely cautious with that. But, in general, if you're saving money, if you're spending less than what you're bringing in, then at least you're heading in the right direction. If when you do your inventory and then you're looking at your budget and your income and your expenditures, you find that you're on the other side of that equation, if you're on the side that's, I'm spending more than I'm bringing in, that is the first and only thing you need to worry about reconciling right now, probably. That would be priority number 1. I'm going to put an asterisk next to that because there is one other minor priority here. But priority number 1 would be, make sure, bring your expenses in line with your income, or go out there, get another job and increase your income to a point where it's greater than your expenses. So that asterisk that I'm gonna put there. I don't wanna complicate things, but if you're never gonna watch another video again or anything like that, I at least want you to be aware of this. While getting that in order is paramount, tantamount to that would be the idea that you need to protect the people you care about. So if you have children, if you have spouses, people that are financially dependent on you, then while you're doing this over here, while you're trying to get your house in order, you also need to make sure that you've managed your risk, that you've looked at things like, do you have enough life insurance? Do you have disability insurance? If people depend on you, you might not be able to wait until you sort this problem. I mean, you could spend 3-6 months a year trying to figure out how to get your expenses and income in alignment here. And along that way, something catastrophic could happen to you. Tomorrow is promised to none of us. So you should really look at things like your life, mainly your life insurance, health insurance, and disability insurance, because those would be the things that, regardless of what you do over here, could be rendered irrelevant by your lack of action here. So those types of things need to be, you need to take a look at those two things. So that's kind of the asterisk. But okay, so to summarize real quick here, first things first, you want to have a goal, some idea of where you want this whole thing to take you, even if it's vague. I'm not saying you need to do a vision board or anything like that, but have an idea and jot it down. Where do you want your finances to take you? Second thing would be just be aware that before you start making these financial decisions, that you have these kind of 5 areas that you need to contend with, cash flow, assets and liabilities, risk management, tax planning, and estate planning. All 5 are going to be factors and be at the table whenever you make a financial decision. So at least be aware of that. The next thing would be make your financial inventory. Take all your assets, all your liabilities, or your debts, write them down. Get an idea of what you have and what you owe, and figure out exactly where you're at right now at this point in time. Next, check your cash flow. In other words, your budgeting. Are your expenses lower than your income? If they are, fantastic. If they're not, that should be priority number 1 to reconcile that. Priority number 1, part 2, let's just say, is to make sure though that if you have people who are financially dependent on you, then in that situation, you need to make sure that your risk management is up to par and make sure that those people are protected in case something happens to you while you're dealing with all this other stuff. So that's kind of where I would suggest you get started. Hopefully that wasn't too complicated. I mean, unfortunately, personal finance is a very complicated topic. So as we move along here, we're going to start moving into some more complicated issues and have a little more nuance there. But if it was too much for you or anything like that, let me know. If you have any questions, any thoughts, please feel free to leave them down in the comments down below here. Click subscribe to join the Plan Ranger community. Love to have you as a part of our community. And thank you very much, guys, for taking the time. I hope this helped.